the whole idea behind these events are just to showcase, I suppose, all the amazing stuff that's happening in the council and shine a light on that, shine a light on the work of staff, and I suppose raise awareness as well on different innovative projects and also the fund. So I should probably have started with my name. So I'm Aisling Hyland. I'm Digital Programme Officer, so I look after the Fingal digital strategy and lots of digital projects that are kind of public-facing projects. And then in my other hat, I'm innovation representative as well. I get asked this all the time. What is innovation? What does it mean? And I find this is probably, well, it's the definition I like the most. It's innovation is something new or a different way of doing something that adds value. So it doesn't have to be, a completely original idea. Apparently, there are no original ideas anymore. We've thought of everything. But can you apply something that you've seen somewhere else, maybe in a different local authority or a completely different service industry, apply it to what you're doing, and it adds value? And that's just generally what innovation is. There are different, I suppose, outcomes of innovation. It can be a new product, it can be a new service, a new way of working, and a new business model. So it's not always a product, it's not always a physical item. It can be a changing of a process. And then there's kind of these fundamental steps to innovate and to innovation. We start with the discover and learn piece, where we're kind of gathering in insights. So if you're looking at a problem, you're gathering insights, you're talking to your colleagues, and you're trying to understand what it is you're trying to solve. Then you're framing that problem. Then you go into the ideation stage, where you're like, okay, we know what the problem is. What are the potential solutions? Then you prototype them, and then you test to see what worked and what didn't work. So that's the general principles of innovation. And I think all of your projects that you've mentioned, or I'm going to get the speakers to introduce themselves now, but any of the projects that we showcased on Innovation Week through the videos or through the people here, they've all kind of had to go through that iterative process where you gather insights, try something out, change it, because usually there are changes, and then learn from those outcomes. So that's just a very brief introduction of what is innovation, trying to just get to the nuts and bolts of it. I'm going to now chat to people that have been innovative and have been innovating in projects. And I'm going to ask my speakers to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with yourself, Sinead. So I want, just for the audience, a brief introduction of your name, your role, and I also am throwing in a little icebreaker. Often people kind of, I suppose, have different, they may innovate in different ways, or they may have a specific location that they're most creative. To me, it's, I'll take the pressure off, I'll give mine first. To me, it's driving in the car. So that's where I have an hour and 10-minute commute. So I would always maybe come up with an idea while I'm driving. So that's my innovation space. I'll hand over to yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sinead Fox from the Environment Department. I'm the Environmental Awareness Officer, and my job is to do with waste prevention, biodiversity, and climate change. I run the Instruments project, but my most innovative space, probably the recycling centre is definitely an innovative space, because you have so much there, there's so many resources, and they're wasted, they're all gone, most of them are gone to waste. So every time I go there, I see a potential opportunity. So it's just for the council to put in those resources to actually funnel those opportunities out. So I suppose that's one of the spaces. But also in the car, I find you come up with a lot of ideas.
Thanks. And I'll hand over to yourself, Alan.
Alan Murphy, I'm the regional manager with Smart Dublin, so that's a collaboration of the 4 Dublin councils. So we look at all the services that the councils provide. So you might be familiar with the LGMA service catalogue. In my view, all those services are ripe for innovation and the use of emerging technology and new data insights to try and deliver those public services better. So the breadth of our program kind of reflects all the services that the councils provide. In terms of where am I most creative, that's the question, is it? I think you touched on something there. I think we're all guilty of coming home from work and think, oh, we were so productive today, we were really busy. But that's probably to the detriment of being truly creative. So I think when I'm most creative is when I'm doing something pretty mundane, like brushing my teeth, or probably something else in the toilet as well, yeah. And I could back that up with a little bit of science. I mean, I think it's well recognized that any workshops that you might attend or do, and there's a lot of intellectual challenge going on, what the facilitator will try and do is then just bring you to something really mundane, like playing with Lego or something like that. And that's when the creativity really kicks in. So, yeah, doing something mundane. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yourself, Jerry?
Yeah, thanks, Aisling. Jerry McDermott's my name. I'm the Media and Communications Manager here with the Council, so I head up the Communications Unit. And basically we're responsible for dealing with corporate public relations, looking after the website, social media accounts, and interacting also with the community. And I think that's one of the big things that has changed in our job over the last number of years is the importance of public consultation and the importance of stakeholder engagement, you know, engaging with councillors, engaging with the public and that and getting across to them what we're trying to achieve and keeping them on board with our plans and our projects. I think for myself, I think it's the same thing I was going to say. It's when I'm doing something mechanical, like driving the car, mowing the lawn, you know, cutting a hedge or something like that, where you're just doing something that's pretty, as Alan said, pretty mundane. And that's when you have time to think about something else. And I think that's when the creativity tends to flow best.
That's when it sparks.
Yes.
Great. Well, on that note, I want to do another little icebreaker just to kind of see to see what you guys would think through these statements. So I'm going to ask you 3 statements and ask you to really quickly say if you agree or disagree with them. You might also think about what you would say. This might be interesting to see whose opinion might differ. Innovation has to have involved technology. This I'm so tight. I like that.
Double-sided printing.
Yeah. It's the other way around
On the long
flip
edge.
side, yeah.
We thought we'd make that a challenge. Okay, so everyone's in agreement that they disagree. Okay. Right, Alan, you're a smart city coordinator. So why is technology is not a
Not any. Why? So my job is redundant. Is that
yeah,
what you're saying? Well, I mean, innovation comes in all shapes and forms. One that springs to mind, because I remember asking my dad when I was about 10 about this, the cat's eyes in the middle of the road. Mm-hmm. Like the guy who invented them, there's no technology involved. It's just little reflective mirrors in the middle of the road, and they are everywhere. They're global, and there's no technology involved. And what an amazing idea to put that in as the sort of central divider on motorways all over the world. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good example. Right, I'll go to the next statement. Innovation is easy.
Innovation is easy.
Okay, I'll go with yourself, Sinead. Why do you agree? Why is innovation easy?
Well, most people come up with ideas easily enough, so it's just a matter of following on with those ideas and bringing it through the process. I think it's easy.
So the coming up with the idea is easy.
I think so, yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. I think the follow through can be really tricky.
Yeah.
It depends on your situation, the support processes within your organization that you work for example. If you want to commercialize something, I think it could be quite tricky.
Depends on whether you like a challenge as well. Sometimes
Yeah.
if you come to a closed door, I just find another open door. But some people don't like closed doors, so it just depends on the personality as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer. Next and final statement, innovation is only for senior managers and not for all staff. Not all staff can innovate in their work. Okay, well, thank God. We do have the Chief Executive Innovation Fund, and it's open to all staff to apply for. But yeah, you all disagreed, Jerry.
Yeah, no,
why did you
absolutely. Like
disagree?
anybody can come up with a good idea, and very often it's somebody who has that sort of moment where they say, well, you know, that's a stupid thing. Why don't you do X, Y, or Z, and that, and that can come from anybody. You know,
Yeah.
Everybody has a solution. You know, I see you know, you asked about the Slido thing earlier. The word I put in was solution, because innovation can very often be a solution to something. You have a problem, and you've got to get creative and innovative to come up with a solution to it. You know, and you know, as Alan said about the cat's eyes, like that was a very innovative, creative solution and a very simple solution. You know, and a lot of the things that people come up with are very, very, very simple ideas, and that, you know, and anybody can come up with them, you know, and very often when you see an idea, you say, Jesus, why didn't I think of that? You know, because it is so simple, you know.
Yeah, it's something I think it was one of those Channel 4 documentaries where they follow the kids at a young age, and like that, you know, when you're on about problem solving, they were looking at these toddlers and they just naturally grab the box to step up onto and reach for whatever toy or cookie or whatever it was.
It's a good example of that,
You
because
just
like one of
the
the best examples of innovation is the Young Scientists exhibition every year, you know, where you have school children from all around Ireland coming to the RDS presenting all these innovative ideas. And, you know, like you look at the Collisons, you know, they're going to become billionaires almost overnight because they came up with the right idea, you know.
Yeah, that's all we need now. So I want to jump into now just asking a bit about your projects. So I'll start with yourself, Sinead. So tell me about the Play It Again project. What's it all about, and how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, so I've worked for a good few local authorities, mostly contracts. And I've worked in some local authorities, in some recycling centres. So when I went down to the recycling centre down in the estuary, the staff there had put to one side, they'd put some instruments to one side, and I'm a musician myself. So I was thinking, now in other local authorities they'd also done this, but you get huge numbers of instruments and other items as well in the recycling centre down here with the population you have. So I started rehoming the instruments and doing the repairs myself. Like it's simple, you know, with strings and whatever. So that's where it started. And then I was down visiting somebody in an addiction centre, and I was in the music room. And they were kind of inviting questions, and I said, oh, sure, what's this room for? And they said, it's the instruments room, or the music room. And I said, oh, and where's all the instruments? And I said, we don't have any. And I said, oh, we could provide some instruments from here. So that's what I did. We started collecting the instruments then at the Estuary Recycling Centre, and we started linking in with different organisations, like for rehabilitation, homeless, and then the autism group in Drynan. And that's where it started. And then it just got too busy then for me to be able to do the instruments. I'd be bringing them home. I had the house full of guitars. They were in the bathroom and everything. And you couldn't hide them because they're big. And then eventually I just knew I had to kind of expand it a little bit more if it was to proceed any further.
And you mentioned earlier about, you know, you hit a roadblock with, you know, an idea, and then you kind of have to try navigate that and try find a different way. Did you come up with any roadblocks on this
That's
project?
right, yeah. So one of them was I wanted to link in with an organisation that would take the instruments on an ongoing basis, that I didn't have to kind of keep having to find different people. So I thought that the Men's Shed might be a good fit because there would be maybe retired musicians from bands and different things, but it wasn't actually an open door. So I had to rethink it, and in the interim then I asked some musicians to do some instrument repairs. So then I thought, okay, so maybe musicians are going to be a good fit. Musicians for musicians, because a lot of the instruments are for children. If you look at the sizes, some of the fiddles, a lot of fiddles we get are junior fiddles. A lot of the guitars we get are, the starter guitars that you might buy in Argos for €20. So then I linked in with the schools, and we started giving them out in bulk, because again, the time factor, I didn't have time to be going around giving individuals instruments, and then there's no follow-up, do we know if they're going to be used? But with schools then, it was a definite that the instruments would be used wisely, so we end up doing there.
That's great. And for the, I think you had mentioned to me before that, it's kind of going national now. This project started quite locally, and it's kind of being scaled up. How's that going, or how is that working?
That's right. So I'm part of an environmental awareness network. So there's 30 of us in the country doing more or less the same job. And we all come up with these ideas, so with different ideas. So I pitched the idea of the Instruments project to them, and 15 local authorities, environmental awareness officers, said that they would try it out. So there are a few challenges there. A lot of them aren't musicians. That's definitely one. So they're not naturally drawn towards instruments. But as I say, you just try to kind of keep them going. We meet quarterly. We have a logo now for the project nationally. It's not just going to be local authorities, so we might link in with Coltas, and there'll be brass bands, and there'll be different like Music Generation and different organisations around the country that we can all link in with. And of course there'll be community groups as well, like Drum Circles is one up in Rush, and schools as well. So we're just using a kind of a generic logo. So it's just a matter of supporting each other and keeping it going, and it is definitely, hopefully, going national, yeah. So I'm delighted about that.
That's great.
And delighted as well that Fingal was open to the idea, because operations run the recycling centre. So they were open enough and willing to, I suppose, invest in the circular economy and keep the instruments to one side, and they had a space there that I could use. And then, it's great to be able to find people that will actually help as well. And they're all interested in the project as well. Passion is a lot got to do with it as well.
Yeah. So once you had the idea, it was kind of supported and you were able to develop it. So
that's right. And then
really important.
The more you set up the framework, then the better it works. You don't have to spend as much time on it.
I suppose when you've been able to scale that, to the other local authorities, you probably learned an awful lot, made.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't want to say mistakes,
yeah,
but overcame obstacles and everything.
Yeah, so pianos would be one example. We don't take pianos because pianos are unpredictable. You don't know what they're like until you actually play them. And then when you move them, they can change. So they're very heavy to move, so you'd have to get like 3 very strong people in. You might need a van. Someone might hurt their back, they might scrape the floor, they might have to come down steps. So it's all these different things. So I just said, look, we're not dealing with pianos, but you maybe, encourage people to, rehome them or whatever. But that was something that the other local authority, I had learned that from, so I was able to say, look, this is the story with pianos. Also, sometimes you get people who are very precious about instruments. They mightn't give an instrument away unless it's perfect. If there's a hole in a guitar, it actually sounds the same. So Glenn Hansard plays the famous guitar. They don't have to be perfect. You can see some of them are, they're all marked and that, but they still sound the same. So, but some people are precious, especially like music teachers, or people who provide instruments. So sometimes they might look to link in with these people, but I just kind of give them the heads up. So sometimes people, they want precious instruments, but all instruments are valuable. So even if it's an instrument that doesn't sound right, it will still be very valuable for a children's group, or a group for disabled children, or something like that. So they all have value. So that's the important thing. And it's all about reuse and repair. So that's where the environmental aspect of it comes through.
Great. I think it's a really good example of a project that's now scaled. So I'll move on to yourself, Alan, because you manage or look after the regional management of Smart Dublin, and I suppose the idea of Smart Dublin is that we're trialling and testing a smart city project in one local authority with the hopes of maybe scaling it up. And have you any examples of that from yourself?
Yeah, so scaling, and what does that mean exactly? It might mean just one project happening in one council and getting copy and pasted across the country, across the 31 local authorities. But if I could make a nod to Deeper's document called Making Innovation Real, they talk about scaling innovation involving multiple public sector bodies. And then they also talk about transformative innovation, which was one of your slides, Aisling, had a changing in a business model, and that's really getting into the weeds of a particular domain. So one project we've been working on is something called Mobility as a Service, which is basically trying to encourage people not to own cars, which is it's a hard sell. Once upon a time, we all had music collections, and these days you've got Spotify and others where you're streaming, you're consuming a service online, and mobility is going that way. That you can consume a mobility service, be it public transport, an e-bike, which is something that Fingal are very proactive on in particular, a car club, autonomous vehicles are coming, so it all falls under that banner of mobility as a service. So a few years ago, this kind of came onto my table, and we were being approached by e-scooter companies, bike sharing schemes, car club schemes, and I was sort of thinking, is anybody looking at joining all these up? And the answer was no. And then we did a bit of research to look further afield, and lo and behold, this is a momentum that's happening in Western Europe in particular. So we took the initiative. We got all the relevant stakeholders in a room, so the NTA, all the operators of these bike sharing schemes, Irish Rail, Dublin Bus, academia as well, and said, look, what could this look like? So we produced a thought leadership, which is basically a vision as to what this could look like. And we started the conversation with all those other public bodies to try and implement mobility as a service in Ireland. So that was a long journey, knocking on a lot of doors, figuring out what's in it for all these different actors, who's got the power in the room as well was interesting to see. So the local authorities have a role to play in all that. We regulate micromobility operators, car clubs, scooters might come to town, who knows. And that all those mobility modes and how they connect with each other from a digital perspective comes under that heading of mobility as a service. So that's a really good example of us representing the 4 Dublin local authorities and scaling outwards and engaging with a diverse set of actors to try and transform transport. Yeah, so there you go.
Okay,
Long-winded answer.
That's an interesting example of kind of scaling an innovation like project between the 4, because I suppose we have a certain role, but we're not the only owners of something that large. Like you're talking about, mobility for, that includes the NTA and other actors. So we're not the only responsible, I suppose, person in the room. Did you find any challenges with that? I'm going to assume you did.
Absolutely. I think the biggest challenge is a readiness challenge. So everybody that was in the room and all those organizations I mentioned, they all kind of saw what's in it for them. The private mobility operators could see a commercial opportunity to tack on to public transport. The Department of Transport thought, geez, this is great. We can shift people away from using private cars. I think for citizens, it's interesting. We're not being overly prescriptive that you must use mode of transport A, B, C. It'll all be about choice, But then I think, let's say, the NTA in particular, I think there's a readiness issue there in terms of they're just maxed out with other huge projects like Bus Connects, the Metro, Connecting Ireland, etc. So there's something that that organisation in particular, and we're going to work with them, and we've kind of done the first stage with them and maybe for them in thinking this through and looking at other models internationally. I think there's a little bit of time to wait for them to get ready and get the right resources to take the lead on this. So, yeah.
It sounds like that project's very much a long-term project with a lot of different stakeholders. From your experience working with 4 Dublin local authorities, what have been maybe your favourite innovative projects that you've either been involved with as Smart Dublin as a stakeholder? Do you have any examples of maybe a shorter term project that's complete? Or
I don't know what it is across the spectrum of projects we're doing, and it really touches on social housing. My day goes from social housing to homelessness to waste management to sustainable mobility, and for some reason I seem to be getting more and more involved in the mobility side of things. So one really good project which involved Dave Storey from Fingal was the whole EV charging infrastructure strategy and the role of local authorities in that. I think when the conversation first started, and Robert Burns was involved in that from DLR before he came to Fingal, we were thinking, okay, we're going to paint all the street poles green, and we're going to have thousands of EV charging ports all over the Dublin region. And it's come full circle to, wait a second, the local authorities are not really in the fuel provision business. Do we really want to step into that business? And so there's a bit of wariness now as to our role. So we did really stick together as the 4 councils, including myself and Caro as well, to define an EV charging strategy for the local authorities and our role in delivering EV charging infrastructure. And that was published, I think, during the summer sometime. So that was a really good example of the 4 councils sticking together, not going off. And there was temptation to go off. Look, we're going to do our own thing, and we're going to have hubs here and hubs there. So there was a coordinated effort to come up with a common strategy, which was great.
Yeah, I think that the way you described it there, you kind of had thought about the solution at first, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of that innovation, that process with all the different stages, the slide I showed earlier, and I think ideate was like the 3rd step, and you guys were thinking of what the solution was, but then really when you thought about it, you went back to, the ideation, or the, looking at the problem first of all, and investigating really, and researching rather than jumping to the solution and maybe spending more money and time and resources on something that when you investigated it and put in research, you took a step back rather than...
Yeah, and kudos to the directors involved in that. There was fierce political pressure on each of them, from the obvious circles to provide EV charging infrastructure in the format that we had become familiar with. So we did kind of push back on that and say, wait a second, what's the strategic role for the councils in the long term? And that's what's led to the strategy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to head over to yourself, Jerry. So, communications manager, you obviously get exposure to pretty much all the projects as they're, becoming launched, and there's press releases. So, would you say Fingal is an innovative council?
Yes, absolutely. And before I even joined the council, and you're doing your research, that was one of the things that kept coming back, was that Fingal was one of the best councils in the country, and it was a very dynamic council. And getting in the door then and seeing it firsthand, it's very much that. And I think Sinead touched on it, is that there's encouragement and backing for people who have innovative ideas, and people do. When you look at the musical instruments down there, and there was cross collaboration between different departments. Sinead's in environment and needed ops to be on board with that project in order for it to happen, and that. And I think there's great collaboration between the departments. I know we sometimes give out about the silo effect and that sort of thing, but it is better than in an awful lot of other places and people are open to ideas. And I think there is, from the very top down, there's a willingness to back ideas if they're seen to be solutions and that they will make things better for our citizens who are our major stakeholders. There is a willingness to go and have a go at it and to try it and that, you know. And you've seen it even, like, if you even look at public consultation and the way we're starting to do that. Like, we did a thing there on the Sutton to Malahide Greenway, where we were going out to public consultation. And certainly the first time we looked at that project, we were going, oh my goodness, this is going to be very, very, very tough and that sort of thing. But we came up with the idea of a video to show people exactly how the cycleway would run through places like Portmarnock and Malahide. And that went out, and as soon as people saw it, they saw what was being proposed, and it made it a lot easier. And as a result, there wasn't the amount of complaints and objections that you would have expected to get, because we had sort of, you know, given them a look at what was coming down the tracks. And you know, we've gone on then to do that for other, like Sustainable Swords project here, which is out to public consultation. We've gone down that route again. And even with the Malahide to Sutton thing, again, you get local councils coming on wanting to say, well, where did you get that from? Can we do that and that sort of thing? So you're being innovative and you're being pioneering. And you know, that's one thing in the communications department that we see a lot is we do a thing called the media book every morning. So we have a media monitoring service, and they come in and anywhere there's a mention of Fingal, it's captured and it comes back into it. And you'll suddenly see Fingal being mentioned in the Clare Champion or the Connacht Tribune. And your first thing is, what's this about? And then you open it up and it's some councillor saying, they've done this idea in Fingal and it's working. And why aren't we doing it here in Clare or Galway or Kerry or Cork? You know, and that's always great to see. And there's a lot of that happens. So I think that's sort of the yardstick that we are innovative in that. I think that's the answer.
Right. And out of, I suppose, all of the projects that you would have, I suppose, heard about in recent years, can you tell us of some innovative projects happening across the council, and maybe some of the ones that I suppose of most memory or recent projects over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's the ones I can remember, because there's a lot of things, you know. And I can remember around about this time last year we sat down and, you know, as we were preparing for the Chief Executive's Innovation Fund, we were trying to give people examples of what innovation that was out there. So, you know, there was things like the community car in Skerries, you know, where, you know, you have people, maybe elderly people, and they need to get to hospital, to medical appointments and that sort of thing. And, you know, they don't want to take public transport, and the public transport mightn't drop them off at the hospital they want to go to. So community came up with this idea of a car. And the car is manned by volunteers, and you just go in and you book the car in the same way as you book a taxi, and it will take you door to door. So it'll take you to the Mater Hospital. You can go in, have your appointment, come back out, the car's there, and it takes you back to Skerries, you know. And it's a very simple idea, and there's no shortage of volunteers that are willing to drive it. And then to take in the sustainability bit, it's an electric car. So, you know, you're ticking a lot of boxes with a simple idea like that. There was Dominica McKevitt out in Ardgillan had the free tree giveaway. So, you know, we want people to plant more trees, and that's, so how do you get them to do it? And she came up with the idea, well, we'd be far better investing a couple of €1,000 in buying young trees and giving it out to people. And she got inundated with people wanting to get a tree, because people love something for nothing. And we got great coverage out of it as well. Like, it was actually featured on the RT News, you know. So that was another very innovative project. And, you know, Hans was supposed to join us today, and that's one of my favorite ones. Is, you know, we had fires on Howth Head last summer, and, you know, for 6 weeks the fires burned, and they needed to find a solution to it. And because it's an area of special conservation, you couldn't be going in with diggers and, you know, the sort of way you might normally go about it. So they came up with the idea to bring the old Irish goats, who had been on the hill 40, 50, 60 years ago and are now nearly extinct. But there was a project that they found in Mulranny in County Mayo, and they supplied about 20 goats, brought them over. They recruited a herder, found an excellent person in Melissa who was actually into goats and was living in Clare, and matched the two together and put them on. And this year there wasn't any fires on Howth Head, whereas across the bay Killiney Hill was on fire, you know, and now the councillors in Dunleary are asking why they can't have goats on Killiney Hill, you know. So, and then, you know, and again, it's sort of one project leads to another project, like, because it's an area of special conservation and that the residents didn't want fences going up around the place. So they went and got this Norwegian idea whereby the goats wear a tracking device around their necks. And it's all done with coordinates and GPS systems. And so it means that they don't need to have fences, but if the goat starts to wander off the patch, they get a little beeping sound, and if they go a little bit too far, they'll get an electric shock. And that keeps them
It's all fixed.
where they should be, you know. And
It's all for their safety.
so there's where the innovation comes in, and now
Yeah.
everybody talks about the goats on Howth, and like from a communications point of view, you know, I see Roisin, my colleague down there, who is looking after the PR for it, but it's the story that just keeps on giving, and it's always being mentioned. And again, it's you know, I mentioned Dunleary, but it's the same all around the country. They're all talking about it, and people are very, very aware of it. And it was a big international story as well, because like Hans ended up doing interviews on radio stations all over the world, and we were picking it up on Reuters of India and in Australia and in America as well, you know. So it was a, you know, very simple, you know. Again, we talked about innovation can very often be a simple solution to a problem, and you know, it was a very simple solution, and it was going back in time to what was there before, you know. And you see it even with the bikes now, you know, like my family had a butcher shop, and we would have had a messenger boy who was on a bike, and he would deliver the meat to people in the town of Dundalk on the bike, and now we see it's gone full circle. The message bike then disappeared, and now they're coming back as e-cargo bikes, and the bike has been a little bit refined. It's not a cardboard box sitting on the front there. It's now sort of, it can be even refrigerated if you wanted and that, but you know, it's moved on, but they you know, it's still a solution.
Yeah, it's a
to the
simple
problem.
idea to,
yeah.
to
You know,
to
and
solve
then
a
just
problem.
finally, you know, I see Kevin Vallely there. You know, Kevin was one of the winners in the Chief Executive's Innovation Fund, the first one, and it's probably the project of the 4 projects that came out. It's the one project that has really flown down the road and been a huge success. I know the planners with their innovation planning portal, which looks very, very good, and has obviously taken, you know, the challenges to get a sort of an innovative project to market, if you like, takes a bit of time, and they've had it, but certainly their project looks very exciting as well. But Kevin's has moved along, and you know, like, that's put a weather station into schools, and you're not only teaching the kids about weather and that sort of thing, but the local community then benefit from having a weather station in their own locality, where, you know, you can see around the times of storms, you can be watching the speed of which storm Emma or storm whatever is coming in at, and you know exactly how it's affecting your particular area, because you have that real-time information, because the information from the weather station has been uploaded onto a Met Éireann website, you know. And it helps Met Éireann as well, because they're getting more information from around the country and around the county. And you know, I even understand there's one at Rush Sailing Club, and I think the Sailing Club are finding it very useful now as to whether they should go out in the water or not, because they have that real-time information. And I think, you know, other organisations like the OPW, I'm sure Kevin will add the extras, but other people have seen the project, and you know, a bit like Sinead and that, they're now jumping on board because they all see the benefit of it. And you know, the great thing is it all started here in Fingal.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to move on to the Chief Executive Innovation Fund. So, as Jerry mentioned, Kevin was one of the projects from last year. We had 3 other projects. 2 of them are still in progress. The interactive planning project you mentioned, that should be live in the next week or so. And digital beach signage is another one. And that, I was out in Balbriggan this morning at Balbriggan Beach, and that unit is up and working now. So, but as these projects happen, they, you know, you go through that phase of you know, exploring and investigating and researching, you know, into the solution that you put forward, or into the problem you put forward. Kevin's is a good example. He put forward an idea. It was a very small idea for, like, I think a couple of these plastic rain gauges, and it ended up being a complete weather station for schools. So it transformed the idea. And we've got one on the roof here, so we'll be able to tell you how much rain just fell in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea of the fund is if you have an idea, to put it forward. You don't have to have the complete solution yet. You just have the idea, you put forward that, and then if you're successful, then you get the time to, investigate and research. The fund is open until the 11th of November. The criteria is that it has to be new. It can't be business as usual. It can't be something that you're already doing and you just want a bit of funding for. It has to be in some way new to your work, new to the council. It doesn't have to be a new idea. It can come from come from childhood.
Yep.
It can be an idea that you've just seen a problem and it's a potential solution, or it's something that you've seen in a different local authority and you're bringing it here. And the other bits of criteria, it has to add value. So you'll see there's about 10 or so questions. How does your idea add value? What's going to be the potential outcome of it? And yeah, it's fairly straightforward, the application form. So if anyone does have an idea to put it forward, thanks for joining. I'm hoping that I haven't gone over. And thanks very much to our speakers, to everyone for showing up, because we're not talking to ourselves, which is great.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Especially like to thank Lisa in the back there, because she did an awful lot. Oh, and it's supposed to be a showcase event, so obviously you can see the instruments, they're being showcased. We have this 3D VR thing. It's another, I suppose it kind of touches on one of the things you mentioned, Jerry, on public consultation and showing, like with that video on the Greenway projects.
Yeah, if you haven't tried it, I would recommend it. It's absolutely amazing. It sort of gives you an idea what this place is going to look like in about 3 years' time when the Swords Cultural Centre is built.
This is a project that we've worked with economic development, communications and IT, and we developed the 3D model of Balbriggan, the rejuvenation plan area. Now we've done one of Swords Cultural Quarter, but the way we can view it is through a VR headset. So that's one way, and it's just to try and immerse people and, for planning, to be able to show people, when we're digging up these areas, what it's going to look like in a more visual way rather than just a drawing. So yeah, check it out if you have a couple of minutes, and I'm sure if anyone wants to do a bit of a gig, we've got a stage here, we've got the instruments, sound system, we're set up. But yeah, thanks everyone, and I'll let you leave.